Hello, good evening,
Hello.
everyone, um, and welcome back to Lucca Changes. Then, I guess I'll just start with a quick introduction for this panel. We have the pleasure of being here with Liz Climo, and I'd like to welcome you back to Lucca Comics and Games. This year it's
Thank you
Lucca
so
Changes.
much.
This year will be separated by an ocean and a couple of continents, but no trouble. Linked by technology and a bunch of monitors, I'm sure we're all bound and connected by the love for the art of comics and the desire of being together again next year in the amazing city of the 100 Towers. For starters, I would like to thank Chiara Emiliozzi that will translate this panel for all the Italian readers. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you.
It's a bit weird for me, as I'm usually the one doing translation, but I'll do my best trying to moderate from the other side of the mic, I guess. So thank you to Federico Zaghis from Becco Giallo, of course, for granting me the
Thank
privilege
you.
of being here and having this chat with Liz. But most importantly, thank you, Liz, for joining us again in Lucca Comics and Games after that first
Thank
time
you.
back in 2018. And
Thank you
about
so
that,
much.
do you remember that first time in Lucca a couple of years ago?
Yes, in fact, just talking now makes me miss it so much because it was such a wonderful time. Lucca is such an amazing city, and everyone was so gracious and nice for everyone I spoke to there. And so I definitely remember a very fond memory.
Yeah, at least now we have some tea instead of that peschini. But that's the main change. But also, it's such an amazing city and amazing time. I'm there as a translator every year, and but as an artist, I guess it must be amazing, even being there in that city, so ancient and so.
So used to just drawing at home in my office in my basement here and posting online, but it's so rare that I get to meet people, especially people in.
Oh gosh, it's so hard for me because I got the feeling that I'm gonna have to translate because that's what I
You were
usually do.
thinking.
So now it's so weird, but I'm gonna do my best just to chat with you. Okay, and I'm trusting that
And
Chiara
I'm
is doing an
trying.
amazing job.
I'm trying to not. I usually talk really fast, and so I'm trying my best not to zip through my words. So I'm hopefully speaking clearly enough that everyone that Chiara can understand. Otherwise, I'd be
No,
like.
she's a tough nut, and I know she knows her job very well. So let's go on
Yes.
from here. So I just
Okay.
got carried away, sorry, and I didn't introduce you properly. So of course, most of the people that are watching us right now would know a lot about you and your work. But for those who don't, shame on you if you don't know Liz Climo's work. Let's just have a quick glance at your story, and I'll just browse through your website, which is work. Let's just have a quick glance at your story, and I'll just browse through your website, which is for those who are not familiar with it. I'll just browse through your bio right after college to work as a character artist on The Simpsons. On The Simpsons, guys. She's the author of Please Don't Eat Me, Rory the Dinosaur, The Little Word of Liz Climo, The Little Word of
You
Liz
know that one.
Climo, which is published in Italy by Becco Giallo, and I have it here. Book for mothers and the people who love them, published in Italy by Becco Giallo in bookshops across the country. Liz lives in Los Angeles with her husband and daughter, and we're going to talk about it and about the last book, if you will.
Okay.
So, decide that illustration would be such a fundamental part of your life. I don't know about the US, but here in Italy, there's been a time when being an artist was not really seen as work, by general public, maybe with a few exceptions for the very heavy names like Pratt, Sergio Topi, Milo Manara, and still, I have quite a few friends of mine that were often asked after saying that they were comic book artists. Oh, yeah, right. What do you do for a living, though? So to the extent
Yes.
that it's still a much current joke, okay, so applying to me
Yes.
as well. for instance.
Uh-huh.
So you, on the other hand, Liz, you have reached a level where your work is widely recognized, translated in various languages, published in many countries. You're a respected professional in the field of illustration and comic book industry, uh, which is a goal many people dream of reaching. So, how was the journey to get where you are now?
Well, I will say that that is also very true here in America, where it is sort of, so, oh, you're an artist? Well, what's your actual job? That's something very true here. I
Right.
was very, it's here too. I was very lucky because I've always a very supportive family, and I have a lot of artists and writers in my family. And so it was always an attainable goal. So luckily, ever since I was little, I didn't really ever question whether or not I could do it. I got very lucky, but I never really questioned the ability. And I feel like I had a lot of support. In fact, my grandmother was an author, and her mom and sister were both children's book illustrators. And my mother was an artist. And so I
So that
just have
runs
always
in the
had, it runs in the family. I mean, there was definitely an element of, okay, this doesn't work out. What else do you want to do? But I always sort of knew this is what I wanted to do. Whoever was very small, I was drawing all the time. So it was always, something that I knew I wanted to do when I got older. Never even really a question. I don't know else. I'm not really good at anything else. So
oh, come on. Well, you're very good in drawing and
oh,
creating
thanks.
characters and stories and compelling, situations. It's your work is amazing, but I'm gonna blabber about it maybe sometime after we started with the interview because there's so much to say and it's so your work is so compelling. I mean, every page makes me want to turn to the next page, as every good book should do. And
Oh.
it reminds me, your work, as I said, reminds me a bit. There's something about it that reminds me of great Bill Watterson. So Calvin and Hobbes. There's a feeling through the books that it's something that brings you in a place where it's not just reading a book. It's
The sort of stuff that I do, I took comics like Calvin and Hobbes or The Far Side or other things that I enjoyed and tried to create my own, not version of it, but just embrace the sort of work that I do and hold on to those things that made me feel inspired and made me feel good and think about why they made me feel inspired and made me feel good.
yeah, I know that feeling. I mean, and you managed to do it. I mean, you reached the level where you're on top. So
Oh.
you worked as a character animator for a period of time, as we know.
I did.
So of course, this thing ran in the family. So your mother, your grandmother. I mean, in your family, you had artists all around you. But then you went on to work as a character animator, and for
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless The Simpsons. So not a small task, I guess. But do you think this experience, and maybe we can talk a little bit about it if you want, has influenced or shaped your vision as far as your personal projects are concerned, namely with regards to the graphic style you developed over the years, but also with the way you set up, storytelling and the atmospheres.
Yes. So I was going to college to study animation and illustration, and actually
Hmm.
left college to get when I got the job on The Simpsons. I left college and started working on The Simpsons before I had graduated and before I had really learned many of the things that I needed to learn in the field that I was studying. And so I ended up learning a lot on the job on The Simpsons. And I'd say that The Simpsons is, it's a lot of it's a sitcom, so it is an animated show, but it's not like cartoony the way that, say, like, Bugs Bunny might be. It's much more subtle, and the jokes are much more subtle. And so I learned a lot about humor and also just the warmth that comes from that show in particular, because The Simpsons is such a, even though it's, Homer's kind of a buffoon. It's still a very warm show about family. And so I think I learned a lot about storytelling and about acting, even in very subtle ways, that has definitely helped me, after working there for 14 years, have helped me do what I do now. Yeah.
14
it
years.
was a long
So
time. I was
what
23 when I started.
did you start with bringing the coffee? I'm sure not.
Yeah,
You
well,
started right away,
I should
and then
I should explain. I actually, like, when I say I left college, I had applied for the animation and illustration program and I didn't get in. And so when I didn't get in, I applied on The Simpsons because I saw they were hiring. And so they actually hired me even though my school didn't want me. So I
right,
started
that's a
drawing on The
success.
Simpsons. My first job was drawing on The Simpsons, but I did not think I belonged there. And I was very nervous that I was going to get fired the entire time.
Right away. So you started drawing,
Right
and
away.
what was your highest point in career for drawing for The Simpsons? What was your favorite character, or what did you enjoy the most?
Well, so I worked the entire time I was there. I drew all the characters because as a character layout artist, you actually get different scenes with different characters. My favorite was always
Mhm.
Milhouse. I loved drawing Milhouse. I loved his big round nose and his square eyebrows. He was my favorite. My favorite character just on the show, personality wise, was always Lisa, because she was sort of the soul of the show, and the brain of the show. But there, nothing will beat that first couple of months there, because it was so surreal and overwhelming and exciting and terrifying. But it was just such a, I never thought that I would actually be able to work on my favorite show. It was my favorite show. I was a huge
Wow.
fan, and it was very, yeah, it was very, very, I was very excited and very nervous at the same time. So I worked really hard. I worked pretty much every day for a year. Weekends, you know, left at 2 a.m. I was just trying so hard to not leave.
So that really shaped the way you work and the way you perceive working, also, right?
Yes, yes. I knew that I wasn't quite good enough when I started working there to work there. And that's not to say that I didn't, I just knew I had a lot of work to do to get to the level where the other people there were. But I really wanted it. So I worked really hard to just
All
hang
right.
on until I got good
Slowly and
enough.
steadily getting to the top.
Yes.
All right. So for 14 years before starting your own projects, or did you work on your projects in the meantime? Were there an
I
overlapping
did.
period?
There was an overlapping period. So as you know, cartooning and animation are two different things. And so I always wanted to do comics and cartooning, sort of like Calvin and Hobbes. But when I got the job on The Simpsons, I shifted my focus to learning more about animation and learning more about making characters move in space and all that. And then a few years in, I kind of went back to revisit my own work and slowly started trying to do more and more of my own work. The trouble is, when you're working really hard on someone else's project, all of your drawings start to look like that person's project. So all of my drawings of people look like The Simpsons. Because I worked on The Simpsons for so long, it was hard for me to sort of find my own style again. And you'll
Is that why
find
you're
that if you
avoiding
watch,
people?
that's why I often avoid people. And you'll find
Mhm.
that if you see a TV show that comes on, a new animated TV show, you might be like, that looks like Family Guy, or that looks like The Simpsons. It's often because somebody has left that show and started designing on the other show, and the drawings often look very similar because you just get used to drawing in that style. So I tried to break
Yeah.
away and do something. That's why they're all animals and their eyes are all very small, because The Simpsons are people with big eyes. So I wanted to do
Oh,
something
so it's
different
a
with mine.
contrast. You didn't
Yes.
want to bear the torch. You just dropped the
I,
torch.
I wanted to. I didn't want to copy Matt Groening. I wanted to do my own thing, even though he's great.
Which is, yeah, which is commendable. I mean, it's the best thing when you have something to say and you say the way you want to. So, which this is amazing. But to get back on tracks, because I had some questions prepared for you, and I was just
Mhm.
wondering
That's me. I'm
away from
wondering.
them. I do too. So we're probably gonna talk about, I don't know, the Australian possums in the end of the conversation. Let's try
Sure.
not to get stranded. So let's get back to the animation stuff, because to me, I'm a bit, I got a personal bias, of course, but animation equals Japan. Of course,
Mhm.
you work with The Simpsons, which is not Japan, and it's
Mhm.
a huge, huge show, and it's animation at its finest. But so I'm curious about your likings. I mean, as a professional, but also as a consumer. So are you partial to a particular style, genre, school of animation? Is there something that you like more than?
I more, or are we stuck? Yeah, I think you're a little frozen. I'm going to keep talking. I'm not sure if we're frozen. Oh, good. Okay. I see you moving again.
Am I
You stuck for
frozen?
a second. You were frozen for just a second, but you're good now. I would say I'm more yes. I'm more drawn to stuff like Miyazaki movies than I am sort of the sitcom, the comedy sitcom animation like this. I mean, The Simpsons was always my favorite show, but when it comes to the animation style, My Neighbor Totoro or Spirited Away, those movies I'm there's so many subtle nuanced acting, little things. You look in the background and there's just so much care taken for each of the characters, and everything is so subtle and beautiful. And I
I
really
told you.
appreciate that. It's well, the other
How can you
thing
not love Liz and her
it's
work after what she's saying? I mean,
my other big thing is I remember because I actually didn't see my first Miyazaki movie until I was older. Like I was probably 24 the first time. And I had grown up with the traditional Disney movies here where it was a very clear, like The Lion King, where it's like, well, this is Scar is the bad guy and, Simba's the good guy. And there was this
immoral.
clear definition of good and evil. And so the first time I watched a Miyazaki movie, I was sort of like, well, okay, that's the bad guy. No, that's the bad guy. No, that's the bad guy. And I realized it's not as black and white. Everything is very subtle, and there's beauty and good in many things. And I think that's a really important thing that not a lot of children get to see so young. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. So it's not, everything isn't black and white. Everything isn't that there's shades of gray in between, if that makes sense. And I think that's a
There's a
very
blur.
important.
Yeah.
There's a blur,
Yes.
yes.
Depending on
That's
where you look, it changes. Yes.
yes, and there is good in things, even if it seems like that thing is inherently bad or evil. There might be good there, and you just have to sort of see it or understand why that thing has gotten to that point. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's sort of what I
It
appreciated
does.
right away. Uh, and so yeah,
Yes, yes. I mean, it's a cultural aspect probably of Japan,
yes,
which when you get in touch with this kind of work, and you shift your perspective, sort of. So let's stay
mm-hmm.
just a little longer in the land of the rising sun. Sorry, forgive me if I'm just
No,
fixated.
yes,
But let's move from there. And so in Japanese tradition, they cherish the concept of do, so the way, where you're supposed to focus on one craft, just one path or career to reach full potential and truly master your art, whatever you want it to be. And that can take a lifetime, sometimes more. But since you said yourself that from a very early age, so since when you were a kid and you decided you would be an artist, you would work with illustration and you were surrounded with artists, do you also think that it's necessary to make that choice very early on? So concentrate on doing that one thing, or would you rather say that it's important to explore different domains, areas of interest, and to be curious about this and that, to become a good artist and express your full potential. And about that, what is your approach to workflow and creative process? Are you monothematic, very concentrated, or do you explore and do you expand to synthesize?
I think to answer your question, I think it depends on the artist. And for me personally, I'm more focused, and I have sort of found the I guess vehicle for how I want to say what I want to say, and I don't push myself as much as I'd like to, but I also, the older I get, the more I sort of understand, well, this is how I want to sort of convey what I'm trying to say, and I'm going to just keep heading in this direction. And if anything, it's less about I guess the way that my art looks, and more about understanding how the audience might perceive what I'm trying to say. That's more important to me. Sort of the more comics I do, the more I think about, okay, well, how might somebody perceive this from this point of view versus this point of view? I want to try and reach as many people as possible and sort of unify as many people as possible and make everybody sort of feel connected in that way. So if anything, I'm just trying to sort of see if I can understand people a little better. For instance, like if I post something, and I'm not going to just not say what I want to say, but if I post something and it offends somebody in some way, I like to think about, well, where is this person coming from? Why might this offend them? And sometimes I'm like, sometimes people can be very sensitive about certain things, but other times people just have, a valid criticism based on where they're coming from. And I like to try to understand, I guess, people in different circumstances.
Empathy is paramount.
Yeah.
Paramount, right?
Yes.
And once again, shifting perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that's sort of what I'm headed towards, and it's less about, I guess, I'd say the more children's books I do with the more backgrounds, because I'm just now sort of getting comfortable with doing more backgrounds. But I'd say I have a pretty long way to go when it comes to completed, beautifully rendered illustrations. But when it comes to just my characters and what they're saying, I'd say that I'm definitely in a focused direction where I'm just trying to learn more about empathy and really and do that without being too sappy, maudlin, like like I don't want to do that either.
So. I find it very, very interesting, because what you're saying actually is that you're focusing on empathy towards the word, so the rest of the word, and what one would think that you're turned and you're open to the to the outside world while you're doing it, this research for empathy and understanding, in going in depth. I mean, in the book, in the character, on your paper, and concentrating and focusing on something that is right in front of you. So you're never being more away from the outside world than when you're inside your world.
It's true.
But from there, you're reaching and seeking for empathy and understanding, which is, I think, it's common to many great artists. Probably, it's a way of bridging, differences.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
it is something that we find in your work. So all right. So now then we broke the ice. We can maybe enjoy your tea and goodbye. No,
I'm gonna have to sip of it.
Maybe we can go more in depth about your books with Becco Giallo here in Italy. And speaking of ice, that reminds me of one sketch in The Little Word, a book for which I happen to be a translator, by the way. And it reminds me of this situation where you have these two fennecs, the desert foxes. I mean, you draw them, and these fennecs, they want to look cool according to rappers, so they cover themselves in ice. And so these kind of puns are quite frequent in your book. You spoke earlier of empathy. So do you know what it's like for a translator having to wrestle with this kind of
Not when I wrote that one, that's for sure. I don't
man?
I don't think I
So
had an appreciation. I don't think I had a real appreciation for translation until the last time I came to Lucca and the first time I sat down with someone and I just went and went crazy talking and it's I have so much of respect and appreciation for translation and translators now because it must be such a hard job. And I just have to say that when you are taking something as simple as that joke in the book and making a pun work, you're rewriting it. I mean, you are rewriting the joke. I know you know that, but
but I'm afraid that
I
I
have
have
such
ruined the fun here. It's not as
no.
strong as no, really, it
Well, it's
really is.
hard.
I don't know if I could. We could stay here all night long talking about how do we translate that because well, I so fresh. I don't know. So this one I ruined it, but the rest of the book is excellent because I didn't do much work on translation. Uh, I'm sorry for that one, which was very good, but
No,
I'm
no.
sorry. So
When
you actually
when
think
I
about
wrote
translation
so
now.
when I wrote that book, now I do because the Little World of Liz, that first book, that one that you had in your hand, is a collection of comics mostly that I had just posted online, and the thought never even crossed my mind that it would be translated in any other languages. I didn't think they would ever even end up in a book here in the United States. So I was not thinking about anything other than, oh, it's the end of my workday. I'm going to do a comic. I'll post it online. It's the end of my workday. I'll do a comic. I'll post it online. But then they ended up in a book and they ended up being translated, which is very exciting. But now moving forward, now that I understand that books that I do now might be translated into other languages, I try really hard to avoid that. So I'm that, which is sort of like what I was saying before with empathy, trying to like understand, trying to make it as
I like
universal as
that.
possible. Yeah.
So you lean for an even more global output, all right? You're not as
Yes.
local as you would really be now.
No, I really do try and think about now like specific uh things that might now I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to be able to recall, but there was something just the other day I was thinking of where I had an idea for a comic and I'm like, well, I don't know if that would make sense other places, so I'm just going to shelve that one for now. That happens a lot. So I really do try to make it as like broad and universal as possible now.
Thank you. So
No problem.
now
Thank
a
you.
bit, I will get a bit sentimental now because I want to talk about really I want to talk about your work. I said that before and I'm going to say it again. When I look at your website, for instance, thelittlewordoflids.com, uh, the first impression is I get this strange feeling like I wish I could go back, being a kid again, to better immerse and lose myself completely in your world of colors and maybe only apparently simple lines. Because the website is so cute, so nice, so neat. But then again, I realized that in fact it's not so much that I'd like to go back to my childhood. It's rather as if with each page you bring back the child that still lingers neglected somewhere in the back of my mind and my heart. Your vision, so your work, in fact, enables me to reconnect with that child through my adult self, enhancing the reading experience uh, and elevating uh, this experience to that almost, I'd say, universal dimension that many an artist strive to reach with their art. So as I proceed to the pages, each sketch feels like an epiphany, like an intimate, heartwarming burst of joy. It's like a delighted surprise. Every page, I smile, and that's just
Oh.
amazing to me because I'm a gloomy person, and that's my heart. So and I'd like to go back to Japan with that again because it's like each sketch is almost like a blend between the most delicate haiku and a koan that makes you think, but it moves you somewhere in here. So it's appeasing and it's extremely satisfactory, and but it's that's a point where I get gloomy. It's completely, utterly contrasting with the world outside, as we see it these days. Um, the situation is quite terrible, and we don't need
Mm-hmm.
to linger on the situation, of course. We know how it is, but h- how are you living these times in the US as opposed to Europe? I mean, we know that we don't want to get political, but you have, election, presidential
Mm-hmm.
terms coming on, and all this sort of stuff. So I was wondering, is this word of yours like a way out, like an escape from the bleaker reality we're facing these days? Is it an
Well,
alternative to the path we seem to have taken? I mean, something that we can find inside each other, and each one of us, that we can relate to, and what that we should find the time to rediscover. Because I mean, from this perspective, it's as if your work can be seen as a guide to reevaluate our human nature through our empathy. But that's the thing that I find most interesting with totems, spirit animals, because that's what you do. You depict humanity through animals.
oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Yes. So the past, here in the US, we in California, we've been pretty much locked down since March, and so I have faced a sort of unique set of challenges where I used to go out into the world and sort of get ideas just from my day-to-day life, and now I'm mostly home. And so I wanted to try at first, and now I wanted to try and create some sort of hopefulness within my comics. And now, especially here, like you mentioned, without getting political, we do have here in America an election coming up next week, and tensions are very, very high, especially on social media. And while I, of course, do have my own personal opinions and feelings about the election here, I don't want to, that's not what I want to say with what I'm doing with my comics, because there's already so many people yelling at each other, is one way to put it, or just saying what they would like to say in a lot of artists who are very beautifully saying, making very strong political statements. And while that's happening, I'm just trying to focus on a tiny escape from all that. And that's not to say that what they're saying isn't extremely important, but I'm trying to find other very subtle ways to say, basically, like you said, just that humanity is very important, and just to sort of take a step back and just remember that we're all sort of here together. And so I just want to try to create like a nice, very small place, I guess, on the internet where you can kind of get away from all of that, because there's already so much of that. And so that's why I tend to sort of stay away from making any very bold political statements or anything with my work. I try to keep it separate from all that, just to kind of create like a separate space.
Yeah, so we can choose, in fact, we can choose a spiritual animal from one of your books. We can adopt one of them and then follow them until we find our true
Yeah.
human nature. That would be like
Yes.
what you do with totems. You would have to smoke peyote though. Though. So, but I think maybe we can enjoy the book even without resorting to joints, so this kind of stuff.
Oh, good. That's
Uh,
good. Whatever
but
either or, whatever you want.
yeah, how come you chose to use the shift in perspective to communicate what it's like to be human in the end, to talk, in fact, about us through these animals?
Well, I think, I love animals, and I do get a lot of animal lovers who follow my work. But ultimately, I really love people, but more importantly, I really want to understand people. So even when someone has a very different opinion from me, I really try to understand where that person might be coming from. And and then I struggle if I can't, because especially now, there's a lot of stuff bubbling up, especially here in the US, and it's harder for me to understand where certain people are coming from. And I struggle
Mm.
because I'm trying to figure out where those feelings, and especially hateful feelings, might be coming from. Uh, And so that's really it. It's more, yes, they're animals, but it's more me just trying to sort of understand everybody's perspective as much as I possibly can, and just sort of study that, I guess.
Okay,
Because
great.
I care about people.
That's why you draw us as mummies. On page
Yes.
61, the only drawing of humans I actually found in your work. We're mummies.
Yes.
No, but that's, I was just joking. I mean, but what's interesting is that, like every artist, you create your own word. So once you created this word, do you continue to speculate a lot about it, or does this parallel universe of sorts with all its bears, rabbits, and dinosaurs, and the rest of the gang sort of unravels by itself under the tip of your pencils? I mean, does it, does it come natural now?
It has always been more of a natural process. And that's just sort of how I do things. That's why I have a harder time doing storybooks, like children's books. I have to sort of force myself a bit more, because creating a story arc and characters and like that sort of process is a bit harder for me than it is just capturing feelings and moments. And in the comics, it's often, I feel like the comics that I've done that I like the most are ones that just popped into my head. I didn't have to think about them at all. I don't know where they came from. They just kind of pop in. The ones that I have to think
Just
really
pull
hard
them
about, just kind of pull them.
out of
Yeah.
thin
So
air.
that's,
Yeah.
and those are the ones that seem to be most successful. So it's more of just sort of a natural process than it is sort of thinking about it really hard. It's more instantaneous.
Yeah, that's quite. I would love to stay here and chat with you all the evening, for all the evening and tomorrow, and let's just stay here and talk about the word. But unfortunately, we just got like 5 minutes, so I would have many more questions. But let's talk a bit about your latest book for Becco Giallo, your mum. We should also remind your fans that the book is already out, and they can find it in bookstores across Italy. So it's from Becco Giallo. It's not this book, but it's the newest, latest book. I don't have it, and I should
I don't have
file a
it either.
complaint. We should file a complaint.
Yes.
But anyway, I know the roots of this book. This book, they dig deep in your personal life, so they draw both from joy and sorrow, and it is like a hymn to motherhood, but also parenting in general. So it's a collection of moments that revolves lightly and cheerfully around one of the most sacred grounds of mankind, which is the birth of new life. Which is a personal experience of yours, of course, as of many other people around the world. But would you like to tell us more about the book in general? We only have
Yeah.
like 5 minutes, but I think
Okay.
yeah.
I'll try to make it fast. So I came up with the idea of the book because for starters, I had a very, very close relationship with my own mother, who died when I was in my early 20s. And I was devastated when she died. And it was a very, very difficult loss that I still struggle with so many years later. And then I also had my own daughter about 7 years ago. She's 7. So so it kind of originated from my feelings of transitioning from a child into a mother, and sort of how having my daughter sort of made me connected to my mom in a lot of ways. So I wanted to talk about that in the book, but I also wanted to talk about, because at least here in the United States, there's a very specific culture around moms where either you're a mother or you're not, and you sort of are in this club if you're a mom and you're not. And so a lot of my friends don't have children, and they're not traditional mothers in their traditional sense. So I wanted to create a book that spoke to all different kinds of mothers, even if you are sort of like a friend of the family who has taken on a mother role, or an adoptive parent, or a step parent. So all the different kinds of ways a person can be a mother, and also how it feels to have that connection as a child to a mother or a parent in sort of that maternal role. So it's a very, like the rest of my work, it's a very all-encompassing sort of, hopefully widely appealing book. A lot of people will say, oh, well, do I give this to someone who has just had a baby, or is it better for someone who, you know, is a grandparent? And of course, as the author, I want to say it's good for everyone, but I will say it's good for everyone. It is. It's for everyone.
It really
It's a
is.
book for everyone.
It
So
really is. I don't have the book, but I got you know, the file here that Federico from Becco Giallo sent me, and it really is. I mean, the sum of your work. It is really you. If you loved the little word of Liz Climo, guys, you're gonna love this one. And I'm just reading it, so I'm sorry I cannot show you, but trust me on this one. It's yes, it's good. It's so
thank
easy,
you.
so simple, so deep in a way. And what the best part of it is that once you finished reading your mom, I think there's a sequel, like a sequel to it, that would be Dad, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You already worked on that book. Is it a published book in the US?
I just
Is it?
finished it. It's not published here yet, but I just handed it in like a couple months ago. So yes, it'll be available, I think, in the spring in the US. Um, it's
And
similar,
I
but
can tell you that
it
Becco Giallo is doing it.
that's right. I'm very excited. I love Becco Giallo. It is similar to the first one and different in some ways. But again, it's sort of that connection of with a parent, in this case a dad, and being the child of a dad, and it just sort of that love between a child and a parent, and a parent and a child, whatever that looks like in your own family, basically.
Aha, so guys, wait for it. But first copy is mine. First copy is mine. So don't, you know,
Don't touch
no
that one.
expectation. It's number one is mine. And but I think yeah, that's too bad. But time's up. I think it's 45 minutes. What can I say? I'd like to say here more, as I said. Um,
I wish
it's
I were
just
in Italy now.
yeah, it would be nice. We would be going for a peschino,
Oh
as I
man.
said, and then we're gonna have like 3 dinners, and then we're gonna go to the
Yes.
Piazza Anfiteatro. Yeah, and enjoy our evening until the morning, and then just enjoy yourselves for 4 days. But
Oh man.
we're gonna try to do it online with Lucca Changes. So I think it's over for this panel. So thanks to Becco Giallo, who published more and more of Liz Climo's book in Italy. Thanks to Chiara Emiliozzi, who translated this interview. Thank you to the tech guys and the crew for making it possible. I know we had some issues in the beginning, but we're online. And thank you to Lucca Comics and Games. That's Lucca Changes for this year, for resisting against all odds. I hope to see you all in the flesh and costume next year's. And thank you, Liz, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was really fun. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good afternoon and good night. Bye, everyone.